27 days. That was how much time humanity had left before the Kethmoran deadline. So Young had barely slept since the ultimatum was announced. She spent her days coordinating with human colony governors, and her nights planning evacuation routes. The math was simple and terrible. Even with every available ship, they could not evacuate 17 colonies in 30 days. The human colonies were home to over 12 million people. Some had been established for 50 years. People had built lives there, started families, created communities. Now they had to abandon everything because an alien empire decided humans did not deserve to exist outside their home system. Admiral Kyung-soo arrived at Nexus Prime on the 25th day. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had commanded the human fleet for 15 years, through pirates' attacks and border disputes. But this was different. This was war against an empire that could destroy humanity. "What are our options?" So Young asked him during their private meeting. "Officially, we evacuate and hope the Galactic Council eventually forces the Kethmorans to let us return." Kyung-soo's voice was bitter. "Unofficially, we fight and die with honor. How many ships do we have?" 47 warships. The Kethmorans have over 500. He sat down heavily. "We could hurt them, but we could not win." So Young nodded. She had known the numbers, but hearing them spoken aloud made them feel more real. What if we do not fight them directly? What if we make it too expensive for them to attack? Guerrilla warfare? Hit-and-run attacks? Kyung-soo considered this. It might work for a while, but eventually they would hunt us down. While So Young and Kyung-soo planned for war, Taiman was deep in the archives again. Veltar had forbidden him to research the ancient warning, but Taiman could not stop. Every night after his regular work was done, he searched through the oldest files. He was looking for any mention of the mysterious guardians or the species that had vanished from history. He found more fragments. A shipping manifest from 40,000 years ago mentioned Guardian Station Alpha 7 as a destination. A diplomatic note from 30,000 years ago complained about unauthorized Guardian interference in a border dispute. A military report from 20,000 years ago described impossible defensive systems protecting a human settlement. But the most interesting fragment was a personnel record. It listed crew members for an archaeological expedition to study pre-civilization ruins on a planet called Kepler 442b. The expedition leader was listed as Dr. Sarah Chen, human xenoarchaeologist. Taiman stared at the record. The date was 45,000 years ago, but that was impossible. Humans had not existed in space 45,000 years ago. This had to be an error in the database, unless it was not an error at all. He searched for more records about Dr. Sarah Chen. There were dozens of them, scattered across thousands of years. She appeared in reports from different expeditions, different planets, different centuries, always listed as human, always working on projects related to ancient civilizations. Either the database was completely wrong, or humans had been in space much longer than anyone believed. Taiman printed out every record he could find. He was beginning to understand that the mystery was bigger than just an ancient warning. There had been humans in the galaxy before. They had been important enough that other species wrote warnings about them. And then somehow they had disappeared from history. But where had they gone, and why was there no record of them in human history? On the New Sol, Jin-ho was dealing with his own impossible situation. The energy readings his ship had detected were getting stronger every day. More important, they were getting more organized. What had started as random signals was becoming a pattern, a network of communication that spanned dozens of star systems. "Captain," Hai-Jin called from her navigation station, "I'm detecting movement in the Zeta-7 system. Something big." Jin-ho looked at the scanner display. A massive energy signature was moving through space at impossible speed. According to the readings, it was the size of a small moon, but nothing that big should be able to move that fast. "How long until it reaches us?" he asked. "At current speed? 6 hours. Jin-ho made a decision. "Set course for the nearest human colony. Maximum speed." "Sir," Woo-jin said from engineering, "our engines cannot outrun whatever that is." Then we warn the colony and prepare to make our stand. But as the New Sol raced toward the human colony on Kepler 442b, something strange happened. The massive energy signature changed course. Instead of following them, it moved to a position between their ship and the Kethmoran border. It was almost as if the unknown object was protecting them. Minji worked frantically at her communication station. "Captain, I'm getting clearer signals now. The transmission is definitely artificial, but the language is unknown." "Wait." She paused, adjusting her equipment. "Sir, I think I can establish a basic translation matrix." "Do it." For several minutes, Minji worked in silence. Then her face went pale. "Captain, the transmission is not just unknown. It is responding to our ship's identification codes. It knows we are human. What is it saying? I can only translate parts of it, but... Sir, I think it is saying welcome home." Back on Nexus Prime, Dr. Yoon was having the worst day of her career. As the head of xenobiology research, she had been asked to analyze genetic samples from the oldest human archaeological sites. The Galactic Council wanted to understand human evolution better, to see if there were any clues about humanity's rapid technological development. What she found made no sense. The genetic samples from 50,000-year-old sites on Earth showed the same DNA patterns as modern humans. Not similar patterns. Identical patterns. Evolution did not work that way. 50,000 years should have produced noticeable genetic drift. But these samples could have come from people living today. She ran the tests again. The results were the same. She tried different samples from different sites. Always the same impossible result. Then she found something that made her drop her coffee mug. In a sample from a 40,000-year-old site, she found genetic markers that did not exist in normal human DNA. They were artificial, created by advanced genetic engineering. Someone had modified human DNA 40,000 years ago using technology that was more advanced than anything the current galaxy possessed. Dr. Yoon sat in her laboratory and stared at the test results. Everything she knew about human history was wrong. Humans had not evolved naturally on Earth. They had been created or at least modified by someone with incredible technology. And that modification had happened when humans were supposedly primitive cave dwellers. She was still trying to understand the implications when her assistant rushed into the laboratory. "Doctor, you need to see this. We just received a priority message from the Kepler 442b colony." Dr. Yoon read the message twice before it sank in. The colonists had found ruins. Ancient ruins that matched the descriptions in Taemin's archaeological fragments. And carved into the walls of those ruins in fresh script that looked like it had been written yesterday was a message in perfect modern human language. "The children have returned. The guardians wake. Let no hand rise against them, for they are the inheritors of the ancient covenant." While Dr. Yoon tried to understand impossible genetics and impossible ruins, the Kethmoran fleet was massing at the edge of human space. Gulthek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, and watched his forces prepare for battle. 500 warships. The largest fleet the Kethmoran Empire had ever assembled. It was enough to conquer most civilizations. It should be more than enough to destroy a few human colonies. "War Prime," his tactical officer reported. "All ships are in position. We can begin the attack in 2 hours." "Excellent. The humans will learn what happens to species that forget their place." But even as Gulthex prepared to attack, strange reports were coming in from his scouts. Ships were detecting massive energy signatures throughout human space. Unknown objects were moving into defensive positions around human colonies. When the scouts tried to investigate, their ships experienced system failures that forced them to retreat. "Probably human defense platforms," Gulthex told his officers. "Desperate attempts to buy time. Our ships will destroy them easily." On Nexus Prime, Taemin was making connections. The genetic evidence from Dr. Yoon, the archaeological reports from the colonies, the ancient warnings in the archives, the mysterious signals that Jinho's ship had detected, they all pointed to the same impossible conclusion. Humans had been in the galaxy before. They had been powerful, possibly the most powerful species ever to exist. They had left guardians to watch over the galaxy after they departed, and now when their descendants were threatened, those guardians were waking up. He found Veltar in the main archive. The old alien was standing very still, staring at a data display that showed reports from across the galaxy. Reports of impossible objects appearing near human colonies. Reports of Kethmoran ships suffering mysterious system failures. Reports of ancient ruins activating after millennia of silence. "You know what is happening," Taemin said. It was not a question. Veltar's blue eyes were dim with fear. "I had hoped this day would never come. We tried so hard to keep the secret." "What secret?" "That you were never gone." "Not really." You scattered yourselves across distant worlds and slept, but your guardians remained. The Kethmoran attack began exactly on schedule. Gulthex had planned it perfectly. 500 warships would strike at 7 human colonies simultaneously. The humans would have no time to coordinate a defense. It would be over in hours. But when his ships entered human space, everything went wrong. War Prime, his tactical officer called out, panic clear in his voice. Our engines are not responding. We are moving at 1/10 normal speed. Gulthex stared at his displays. His mighty fleet, which should have been racing toward their targets, was crawling through space like wounded animals. What is causing this? Unknown, sir. All our systems show normal function, but we cannot increase speed. On the main screen, Gulthex could see human ships moving normally around his trapped fleet. Small human patrol boats zipped past his massive battleships, as if the Kethmorans were standing still. It was humiliating. Sir, the communications officer reported, we are receiving a transmission. It is on all frequencies. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was human, but it carried an authority that made even Gulthex feel small. Kethmoran fleet, you have violated the ancient covenant. Your aggression against the children of humanity cannot be allowed. Surrender now and you will be treated with mercy. Gulthex roared in anger. We do not surrender to humans. Continue the attack. His weapons officer tried to fire the main guns. Nothing happened. The weapon systems were completely dead. All across his fleet, the same thing was happening. The most advanced military technology in the galaxy had simply stopped working. On Earth, Dr. Dong Hyun was trying to understand how the Guardians were doing the impossible. He was humanity's best quantum physicist, and what he was seeing made no sense according to any known laws of physics. They are manipulating space-time itself, he explained to the emergency council meeting. The Kethmoran ships are not actually moving slowly. From their perspective, time is passing normally, but the space around them has been compressed. They think they are traveling at full speed, but they are barely moving at all. Is that even possible? Asked General Park, the head of Earth's defense forces. According to our current understanding? No. But the Guardians are using technology that is thousands of years more advanced than ours. They can bend the rules of physics in ways we cannot imagine. On the colony world of New Jeju, the colonists watched in amazement as Kethmoran attack ships approached their planet at the speed of drifting leaves. What should have been a terrifying assault had become an almost comical sight. The massive alien warships crept through space so slowly that children pointed and laughed at them, but the Guardians were not finished demonstrating their power. As Dong Hyun watched from Earth, massive structures began appearing throughout the galaxy. They were not ships in any conventional sense. They were geometric forms that hurt the eyes to look at directly, shapes that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human mind could process. What are those? General Park asked. I think, Dong Hyun said slowly, they are the Guardians themselves, not their ships, them. On Nexus Prime, Hee-Jin was experiencing something that no human had felt for 50,000 years. She had been working at her navigation station when suddenly her mind filled with alien thoughts. But they were not really alien. They were human thoughts, but from minds so old and vast that they felt like looking into the center of a star. She could see the galaxy as the Guardians saw it. Every star, every planet, every living being was connected in a web of quantum consciousness that stretched across space and time. She could feel the Kethmoran fleet struggling against forces they could not understand. She could sense the fear of other alien species as they watched their most powerful military become helpless. And she could hear the voice of the Guardian Network speaking directly to her mind. Child of humanity, you have been chosen to serve as a bridge between the old and the new. Through you, we will speak to your people. Hee-Jin tried to respond, but her voice would not work. The Guardian presence in her mind was too overwhelming. Do not fear. We mean no harm to our children. We are here to protect you as we have always protected you. Images flashed through her mind. The ancient human civilization that had ruled the galaxy. Cities that floated in space without any visible support. Ships that could travel between stars in the blink of an eye. Humans who had transcended the limitations of normal biology and become something greater. Why did you leave? She managed to think. Because power without wisdom leads to destruction. We became too powerful, too godlike. We were in danger of losing our humanity. So we chose to scatter ourselves across the galaxy and sleep, leaving only guardians to watch over our children when they eventually return to the stars. And now we have returned. Yes, and just in time. The Kethmarans have made the same mistake that others have made throughout history. They have forgotten that some rules exist for very good reasons. Back on the Destroyer of Worlds, Gulthex was discovering just how good those reasons were. His ship's weapons were useless. His engines barely worked. His communications were jammed except for the Guardian transmissions that kept offering him chances to surrender. But Gulthex was a warrior. He would not give up. If his weapons would not work, he would ram his ship into a human colony. If his engines would not give him speed, he would use what little movement he had to cause as much damage as possible. He ordered his ship to head toward the nearest human settlement. It was a small research station with only a few hundred people. He could at least kill some humans before the Guardians destroyed his fleet. But as his ship turned toward the research station, something extraordinary happened. The space around the station began to change. Reality itself seemed to fold and twist. The research station, which had been built on an asteroid, simply vanished. Where did it go? Gulthex demanded. His sensor officer stared at his instruments in confusion. Sir, according to these readings, the station has been moved to a different star system. It is now orbiting a star 300 light-years away. That is impossible. Yes, sir, but that is what happened. The Guardians had not destroyed the research station. They had simply moved it to safety, treating the laws of physics like suggestions rather than absolute rules. Gulthex began to understand that he was not fighting an enemy he could defeat. He was fighting forces that existed beyond his comprehension. On the human colony ship New Sol, Captain Jin Ho was having a very different experience. The Guardian ship that had appeared next to his vessel was not threatening them. Instead, it was teaching them. Your ancestors left you many gifts, the Guardian explained through the communication link. Technologies that have been sleeping in your genetic memory, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Minji looked up from her station with wonder in her eyes. Captain, our ship's computer is upgrading itself. I do not know how, but new systems are coming online. Systems that were never there before. Wu Jin called out from engineering. Sir, our engine efficiency just increased by 300%. And we have new weapon systems that I have never seen before. We are not giving you these abilities, the Guardian said. We are simply awakening what was always there. Your ancestors built these capabilities into human technology and human genetics. They have been waiting for humanity to mature enough to use them responsibly. Jin Ho felt a strange sensation, as if memories that were not his own were surfacing in his mind. He could suddenly understand technologies that had been impossible moments before. He knew how to operate weapon systems that had not existed on his ship. He could see patterns in space that revealed hidden structures and energy fields. This is what your people were before they chose to sleep, the Guardian continued. And this is what you can become again if you choose wisdom over power. Across the galaxy, other humans were experiencing similar awakenings. Dr. Yunjung found that she could understand alien biology in ways that had never been possible before. Tai Min discovered that he could read ancient languages as easily as his native Korean. So Young felt strategic and tactical knowledge filling her mind, giving her insights into galactic politics that went far beyond her training. But it was Yun Ah, a young artist working on a human colony, who received the most profound awakening. She had been painting in her studio when suddenly her mind exploded with visions of the ancient human civilization. She saw their history, their achievements, their terrible decision to abandon power in favor of wisdom. And she saw something else. She saw the consciousness of the ancient human who had designed the Guardian system. He was still alive, after 50,000 years, existing as a pattern of quantum energy within the Guardian network. Child, the ancient architect spoke to her through time and space. I have waited so long to speak with our descendants. We were afraid that when humanity returned to the stars, they would repeat our mistakes. But watching your people face this crisis, I see that you have learned what we had to discover the hard way. What did you learn? Yuna asked. That true strength is not the ability to destroy, but the ability to protect. That wisdom is more valuable than power. That some victories are won not by fighting, but by choosing not to fight. Through Yuna's mind, the architect spoke to Al. Through Yuna's connection to the ancient architect, the truth of humanity's past spread across the galaxy like light breaking through darkness. Every human suddenly understood their heritage, but the knowledge came with overwhelming responsibility. The architect's consciousness was vast and ancient, older than most civilizations. Through Yuna, he spoke to humanity with the voice of a parent welcoming children home after a long journey. My children, you have grown wise in our absence. When we scattered ourselves across distant worlds 50,000 years ago, we feared that our descendants would repeat our mistakes. We had become too powerful, too removed from the struggles that make us human. We could reshape reality with a thought, but we were losing our souls. Yuna felt tears streaming down her face as the architect's memories filled her mind. She saw the ancient human civilization at its height, cities that floated between stars powered by the energy of black holes, humans who had evolved beyond physical form, existing as pure consciousness while maintaining the ability to interact with the material world, a galaxy-spanning empire built not on conquest but on protection and guidance. We ruled this galaxy for 20,000 years, the architect continued, but ruling was never our goal. We became the guardians of peace because no one else could do it. We prevented wars, healed damaged worlds, and guided younger species toward wisdom, but in doing so, we became distant from our own humanity. Admiral Kyung-soo, listening from his flagship, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Why did you leave? If you were helping the galaxy, why abandon it? Because absolute power corrupts absolutely. Even with the best intentions, we were becoming gods, and gods make poor humans. We saw the path we were walking. In another 1,000 years, we would have lost all connection to what we once were. We would have become something else entirely, something that might have eventually seen other species as insects to be managed, rather than beings to be protected. On Nexus Prime, Taman watched as Veltar and the other alien delegates struggled to understand what they were hearing. For thousands of years, their species had built their entire understanding of galactic history on incomplete information. They had known that an ancient civilization had once existed, but they had never imagined it was human. So you chose to fragment yourselves, Veltar said, his blue eyes dim with shock. You gave up godlike power to remain human. Yes, we scattered our people across distant worlds at the edge of the galaxy. We used our technology to make them forget their true nature, to let them develop naturally. We hoped that when they eventually returned to the stars, they would bring with them the wisdom that comes from struggle, from building something rather than inheriting it. Dr. Yoonjung, monitoring the biological changes happening to humans across the galaxy, made an amazing discovery. The awakening was not just psychological. Human DNA was actually changing, activating dormant sequences that had been placed there by their ancestors. The genetic modifications we detected, she reported to Earth Command, they were not random. They were a carefully designed system for gradual enhancement. As humans mature as a species, new capabilities unlock automatically. We are literally becoming what our ancestors were, but slowly with wisdom gained through experience. The transformation was not limited to humans. Across the galaxy, the Guardian Network was revealing itself in its full scope. Massive structures that had hidden in the spaces between dimensions for 50,000 years began to phase into normal space. They were not just ships or stations. They were entire artificial worlds, each one larger than most planets, filled with technologies that made current galactic science look primitive. But the most amazing sight was reserved for the Kethmaran fleet. As Gulthex and his warriors experienced their healing, they watched something impossible unfold before their eyes. Guardian facilities were materializing around their ships, structures so advanced that they seemed more like living organisms than machines. "What are they doing to us?" asked Gulthex's second-in-command. But there was no fear in his voice anymore. The healing process had removed his capacity for fear-based aggression. "They are correcting us," Gulthex replied, and somehow he understood exactly what that meant. "For generations, my people have been damaged by war and conquest. We thought aggression was strength, but it was actually a sickness. They are curing us. Dr. Yunjung's instruments detected the process happening at a genetic level. The Kethmorans were not being controlled or brainwashed. Instead, their DNA was being repaired, removing mutations that had been caused by thousands of years of violence and warfare. They were becoming what their species had been before war changed them. This is not domination, Dr. Yunjung reported in amazement. This is healing on a scale we never imagined possible. They are reversing the genetic damage that violence causes to entire civilizations. On Earth, world leaders watched the events unfolding across the galaxy with a mixture of awe and fear. President Kim stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by advisors who were all struggling to understand their species' new role in the universe. "What does this mean for us?" she asked Dr. Dong Hyun. "If we are the inheritors of this power, what are our responsibilities?" "I think," Dr. Dong Hyun said carefully, "we are being given a choice. We can reclaim our ancestors' role as the galaxy's protectors, or we can choose a different path. But either way, we cannot go back to being just another young species struggling to survive." The choice became more urgent when other alien empires began to react to the revelation. The Valdorian Republic, humanity's traditional allies, sent a message of congratulations and support. But the Zephyrian Empire, which had always seen humans as potential rivals, began mobilizing their fleets. "They are afraid," So Young reported from Nexus Prime. "Half the galaxy is celebrating the return of the ancient protectors. The other half is terrified that humanity will become the same kind of overlords they overthrew. Thousands of years ago, Emperor Mortek of the Zephyrian Empire appeared on galactic communication networks with a declaration that sent shockwaves across civilized space. "We will not bow to human supremacy. The Zephyrian Empire has the ultimate weapon. If the humans think they can dominate us with their ancient toys, they will learn otherwise." The ultimate weapon was the World Breaker, a massive construct that could destroy entire planets. It had been built in secret over centuries, designed to be the final answer to any existential threat to the Zephyrian Empire. Mortek ordered it to target Earth itself. When news of the World Breaker reached humanity, panic spread across human space. Their genetic awakening was still in progress. Most humans had not yet developed the abilities their ancestors possessed. Earth was still vulnerable, but the Guardians were not concerned. Through Yuna, the ancient architect spoke with a calm that was somehow more frightening than any threat. "The Zephyrians will learn the same lesson that others have learned throughout history. There is no weapon that can threaten those who built the very fabric of space and time as we know it." Admiral Kyung-soo mobilized the human fleet anyway. Even with Guardian protection, he could not stand by while Earth was threatened. But as human ships moved to intercept the World Breaker, something extraordinary happened. The Guardian network activated a protocol that had not been used for 50,000 years. Across the galaxy, every weapon of mass destruction simply stopped working. Not just Zephyrian weapons, but every device designed to cause planetary-scale destruction. They did not explode or malfunction. They simply became inert, their destructive power converted into harmless energy that dissipated into space. Mortek watched in horror as his ultimate weapon, the product of centuries of work and resources, became as harmless as a child's toy. Impossible. Nothing can neutralize quantum destruction matrices. The Guardian response came not as words, but as a demonstration. The World Breaker itself began to change. Its massive destructive systems transformed before the Emperor's eyes, becoming something entirely different. Where once there had been planet-killing weapons, there were now terraforming systems capable of bringing life to dead worlds. "We do not destroy," the Guardian network announced across all frequencies. "We create. Your weapon will now serve life instead of death. Use it wisely." But the most profound change was happening to Mortek himself. Like the Kethmorans before him, he felt the healing touch of Guardian technology. The paranoia and aggression that had driven him to build the World Breaker simply melted away. In its place came understanding and deep shame for what he had almost done. "Forgive us," he broadcast to Earth. "We were afraid, and fear made us foolish. How can we make amends for threatening your world?" President Kim's response surprised everyone, including herself. "Help us learn to be better guardians than our ancestors were. Help us remember that power should serve wisdom, not the other way around." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as other species grappled with the return of humanity's true nature. Some, like the peaceful Centauri alliance, welcomed their ancient protectors with relief. Others, like the warlike hegemony of Thule, fought against the healing process until they too were transformed. But in every case, the Guardians' response was the same. They did not conquer or destroy. They healed, protected, and offered guidance. The galaxy was remembering what peace looked like after 6 months after the awakening, as historians would later call it. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have imagined. Taman stood in his new office at the Galactic Historical Institute, looking out at a view that still amazed him every day. Nexus Prime had been transformed by Guardian technology into something that was part space station, part garden and part work of art. The walls of the station were now alive, grown from a material that seemed to be both metal and living tissue. Gardens floated in mid-air without any visible support, their plants from 100 different worlds creating patterns of color that shifted with the emotions of the people nearby. The air itself seemed to sparkle with energy that made everyone who breathed it feel healthier and more peaceful. Taman was no longer just an archivist. He had been appointed as the first human galactic historian, tasked with documenting the true history of the galaxy and making sure that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. His assistant was Kethmoran scholar named Thulgarin, who had once been a military strategist under Golthex. Now Thulgarin spent his days helping to write the real story of galactic civilization. The final records from the Outer Rim archives have arrived, Thulgarin reported. His voice still carried the deep tones of his warrior species, but there was a gentleness there that would have been impossible before his healing. We now have documentation of 47 different species that threatened humans over the past 50,000 years. Taman nodded. The pattern was always the same. A species would grow powerful and aggressive. They would see humans as a threat or an obstacle. They would attack human settlements. And then the Guardians would activate, not to destroy the attackers, but to heal them and guide them toward peace. It was a test, Taman said, understanding finally clicking into place. Every time it was a test. The Guardians were not just protecting humans. They were testing other species to see if they could learn to choose peace over war. And we all failed, Thulgarin added sadly. Generation after generation, we chose violence. Only when the Guardians forced us to change did we discover what we could have been all along. The door to their office opened, and So Young entered. She looked tired but satisfied. As the new Human High Coordinator, she had been working with the reformed Galactic Council to establish new laws and principles for interstellar cooperation. It was exhausting work, but also the most important job in the galaxy. How are the negotiations going? Taman asked. Better than expected. The Centauri want to establish joint research stations with us. The Valdorians are offering to help with terraforming projects. Even the Zephyrians want to contribute. Emperor Mortek personally designed a new planetary defense system that protects worlds instead of threatening them. So Young sat down heavily in one of the living chairs that had grown from the station's walls. The chair adjusted itself to support her perfectly, sensing her fatigue and providing exactly the comfort she needed. The hard part is not accepting help, she continued. The hard part is making sure we do not become the overlords our ancestors feared they might become. Every species in the galaxy wants to follow our lead now. They see us as the wise guardians who can solve all their problems. But that is exactly what our ancestors did not want, Taman observed. Exactly. So we have to be very careful. We guide, we suggest, we offer help when asked. But we do not rule. We do not make decisions for other species. We help them make better decisions for themselves. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening as humanity learned to use its restored abilities responsibly. On Earth, Dr. Dong Hyun was working with scientists from dozens of worlds to understand Guardian technology. But instead of keeping the knowledge for humans alone, they were sharing it with anyone who could use it peacefully. The key, Dr. Dong Hyun explained to a mixed group of human and alien researchers, is that Guardian technology only works for those who truly want to help others. It responds to intention, not just to knowledge. You cannot use it to harm, only to heal and protect. One of the Zephyrian scientists raised a tentacle. What happens if someone tries to use it for destruction? The technology simply will not function. Our ancestors built safeguards into the very fabric of space-time. Guardian technology can only create, never destroy. Meanwhile, Captain Jin-Ho was leading one of the most important missions in human history. His ship, now enhanced with Guardian technology, was visiting distant worlds where human populations had been sleeping for 50,000 years. Each world they visited was like opening a time capsule. The humans they found were changed by their long isolation. Some had adapted to high-gravity worlds and become stronger and taller. Others had developed enhanced mental abilities after living on worlds with unusual energy fields. Each group brought unique knowledge and perspectives that enriched humanity as a whole. "Captain," Hyojin called from her navigation station, "we are approaching the Kepler 438 system. Sensors detect a human settlement on the fourth planet." Jin-Ho smiled. This would be the 15th sleeping human colony they had awakened. Each time was different, but the joy of reunion was always the same. When they landed on Kepler 438b, they found a human settlement that had developed into something amazing. The people there had been influenced by the planet's unique crystalline formations. Over thousands of years, they had learned to communicate through crystal resonance, creating a form of telepathy that connected their entire community. "We have been dreaming of this day," said their leader, a woman named Hannah who spoke in harmonics that made her voice sound like music. "Our crystals told us that the time of reunion was coming." "Do you remember who you were before?" Jin-Ho asked. "Fragments, dreams of stars and great ships, knowledge that felt like memories but could not be real. Now we understand. We are the children of the Guardians, and it is time to return home." Back on Nexus Prime, Dr. Yoon-jung was making discoveries that changed their understanding of life itself. The Institute for Galactic Harmony had become the most important research facility in known space. Scientists from every species came there to learn how Guardian technology could heal not just individuals, but entire ecosystems. "We have confirmed it," Dr. Yoon-jung announced at a galaxy-wide conference. "Guardian healing technology can reverse the genetic damage caused by pollution, radiation, and warfare. Worlds that have been dead for centuries can be brought back to life." The demonstration she showed made delegates gasp in amazement. A planet in the Rigel system, poisoned by industrial pollution 300 years earlier, was now green and blue again. Guardian platforms had spent just 6 months cleaning the atmosphere, purifying the oceans, and restoring the genetic diversity that had been lost. "But the most important discovery," Dr. Yoon-jung continued, "is that we do not need Guardian technology to do this ourselves. The healing process teaches us how to maintain balance naturally. Once a world is restored, its inhabitants can keep it healthy using conventional technology guided by wisdom instead of greed." Emperor Mortek himself stood to address the conference. The transformation in the former warmonger was remarkable. Where once there had been a paranoid dictator, now there stood a philosopher king whose words carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "Friends, I speak as one who was healed from the madness of power. My empire spent centuries building weapons and threatening our neighbors because we believed that fear would keep us safe. But fear only creates more fear. The Guardians taught us that true security comes from making sure everyone is safe, not just ourselves." He gestured to a holographic display that showed the former Worldbreaker, now converted into a massive terraforming platform. "Our ultimate weapon now creates gardens instead of graves. It brings life to dead worlds instead of bringing death to living ones. This is what strength really means." From her studio on the colony world of New Harmony, Yuna watched the conference with satisfaction. Her connection to the ancient architect had faded as the emergency passed, but she still felt his presence sometimes, like a warm memory of a conversation with a wise grandfather. She was working on her latest project, a massive sculpture that would be placed at the center of Nexus Prime. It was called The Return, and it showed humanity's journey from the stars to Earth and back to the stars again. But the most important part of the sculpture was not the humans in it. It was the empty space around them, representing all the other species that humanity had learned to live with in peace. "The greatest art," she had explained to reporters, "is not what you put in, but what you leave out. The space between the figures is where understanding lives." The sculpture's dedication ceremony was attended by representatives from every known species. Gulthex, now serving as a peace negotiator instead of a war leader, gave a speech that moved many to tears. "This monument reminds us of the galaxy's oldest rule: do not threaten the humans." But now we understand that this rule was never about human superiority. It was about protecting the protectors, The humans are our gardeners and we are their garden. Together, we grow. As the ceremony concluded, a young Centauri child asked her parent a question that had become common across the galaxy. Why are the humans so powerful? The parent, a blue-skinned woman with large kithao. The lights in the archive room flickered as Taemin touched the old data crystal. He had been working in the deep storage levels of Nexus Prime for 3 months now, and he still found new mysteries every day. The Galactic Council's archives held millions of years of history from hundreds of different worlds. Most of it was boring trade records and diplomatic notes. But sometimes, just sometimes, he found something that made his heart race. The crystal in his hands was different from the others. It was older, much older. The surface had strange markings that his translation device could not read. When he plugged it into his workstation, the screen filled with symbols that looked like they were carved by hand instead of typed by a computer. Taemin leaned closer to read the text. His eyes grew wide. There, in the oldest galactic script he had ever seen, were simple words that made no sense. Do not threaten the humans. He checked the date stamp 3 times. 50,000 years ago. That was impossible. Humans had only been traveling in space for 200 years. 50,000 years ago, his ancestors were still living in caves and hunting animals with stone tools. How could there be a warning about humans from before humans even existed in space? His hand shook as he made a copy of the file. This was big. This was very big. He needed to show someone, but who? Most of the other archivists would think he was making it up. But there was one person who might listen. Veltar had been working in the archive since before Taemin was born. The old alien looked like a walking tree, with bark-like skin and eyes that glowed soft blue in the dark. Veltar knew more about ancient history than anyone else on the station. If anyone could explain this mystery, it would be him. Taemin found Veltar in his usual spot, sorting through data crystals in the main reading room. The old alien moved slowly, his long fingers careful with each ancient record. When Taemin approached, Veltar looked up with those glowing blue eyes. "Young human," Veltar said in his deep, slow voice. "You look excited. What have you found?" Taemin held out the crystal. "I found this in Section 7 Alpha. Look at what it says." Veltar took the crystal and plugged it into his own workstation. As soon as the text appeared on his screen, the old alien went very still. His blue eyes stopped glowing. His bark-like skin turned a darker color. For a long moment, he said nothing. "Where exactly did you find this?" Veltar asked. His voice was different now, worried. "In the deep storage. It was mixed in with some old trade records from the Outer Rim." "Why? What does it mean?" Veltar looked around the room. There were other people working nearby, but none of them were paying attention. He leaned closer to Taemin and spoke in a whisper. "This should not exist. These records were supposed to be destroyed long ago." "Destroyed? Why?" "Because some knowledge is too dangerous to keep." Veltar's fingers moved quickly over his workstation. "I am marking this file as classified. You will not speak of this to anyone. Do you understand?" Taemin felt confused and frustrated. "But I don't understand what it means. Who wrote it? Why would someone write a warning about humans 50,000 years ago? There are questions that should not be asked, young human. This is one of them." Veltar removed the crystal and handed it back to Taemin. "Return this to storage. Forget that you found it," but Taemin could not forget. The words stayed in his mind as he walked through the station's corridors. Do not threaten the humans. What kind of threat could humans be? They were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the smartest. They were not the oldest. They were just humans. On the other side of the station, So Young was having her own problems. As the human military attaché to the Galactic Council, she attended all the important meetings. Today's meeting was about trade routes and shipping lanes. It should have been boring. But the representative from the Kethmoran Empire was making it very interesting. Gulthek stood over 2 meters tall, with gray skin and red eyes that seemed to glow with anger. His people were warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds before joining the Galactic Council. They were not known for being friendly, but today Gulthek seemed especially hostile. "The humans take too much," Gulthek said, his voice like gravel. "They have colonies on 17 worlds. They control 3 major trade routes. They have too much power for such a young species." So Young kept her face calm, but inside she was worried. The Kethmorans had 10 times more ships than humanity. If they decided to make trouble, it would be very bad for her people. The human colonies were all established legally, she said. We followed all the proper procedures. We signed all the required treaties. Treaties can be changed, Gulthex replied. Young species should know their place. Other representatives around the table looked uncomfortable. The Zalani delegate, a blue-skinned woman named Kesara, tried to change the subject. Perhaps we should discuss the shipping routes instead. But Gulthex was not finished. My people have been talking. We think the humans have grown too bold. Perhaps it is time to remind them that they are not the rulers of this galaxy. So Young felt a chill run down her spine. That sounded very much like a threat. After the meeting ended, she sent an urgent message to Earth. The government needed to know what the Kethmarans were planning. Far from Nexus Prime, Captain Jin Ho was dealing with his own mystery. His ship, the New Soul, was on a routine exploration mission in the Outer Rim. They were mapping new star systems and looking for planets that might be suitable for colonies. It was quiet work usually, but today was different. His navigator, He Jin, had detected strange energy signals coming from empty space. When they investigated, they found something that should not exist. Captain, said Wu Jin from the engineering station, these readings don't make sense. There's a massive structure out there, but it's not showing up on our visual sensors. Jin Ho stared at the scanner display. The energy readings showed something huge, bigger than a space station. But when he looked out the window, he saw only empty space and distant stars. Could it be cloaked? He-Jin asked. Maybe, Jin Ho said. But this energy signature is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's almost like what, sir? Like it's been sleeping and now it's waking up. As they watched, more energy readings appeared on their sensors. Whatever was out there, it was not alone. Similar signals were coming from other star systems. Dozens of them. All across the Outer Rim, something was stirring. Minji, the communications officer, looked up from her station. Captain, I'm picking up a transmission. It's very faint, but it's definitely artificial. Can you translate it? Working on it, sir. Minji's fingers flew over her controls. It's in an unknown language. But the pattern is repeating, like a beacon. Jin Ho felt the same chill that So Young had felt hours earlier. Something was happening, something big. He ordered his crew to maintain their distance and keep monitoring the signals. Then he sent his own urgent message back to Earth. Back on Nexus Prime, Taman could not stop thinking about the ancient warning. Despite Veltar's orders, he kept searching through the archives. He was careful to avoid the sections that Veltar monitored, but there were other records, older ones, stored in places that few people ever visited. He found fragments, broken pieces of information that made no sense by themselves, references to the Guardians and the Great Departure, mentions of a species that had simply vanished from history. And always in the oldest records that same warning, do not threaten the humans. The more he searched, the more confused he became. It was as if someone had gone through the archives and deliberately removed information about something very important. But they had missed a few pieces, fragments that had been filed in the wrong places or forgotten in storage. One fragment caught his attention. It was a partial record from an archaeological expedition. The archaeologists had found ruins on a dead world at the edge of the galaxy. The ruins were old, older than any known civilization, and carved into the walls in a dozen different languages was the same message: do not threaten the humans. The expedition had been ordered to stop their work and leave the planet. The ruins were declared off-limits by the Galactic Council. No reason was given. The archaeologists had protested, but their protests were ignored. Taemin printed out the fragment and hid it in his personal files. He was beginning to understand that there was a secret here, something that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. But why? What could be so dangerous about humans that it needed to be covered up? His answer came the next day, when So Young's urgent message reached Nexus Prime. The Kethmaran Empire had issued an ultimatum. All human colonies beyond the Sol system had 30 days to evacuate. If they refused, the Kethmarans would remove them by force. The Galactic Council was in emergency session. So Young stood before the assembled delegates and read the Kethmaran demands. Her voice was steady, but Taemin could see the fear in her eyes. This is an act of aggression, she said. The human colonies have done nothing wrong. We have followed all laws, respected all treaties. This ultimatum is a violation of the Galactic Peace Accords. Gulthex rose from his seat. The Peace Accords protect established species. Humans are too new, too weak to claim such protection. You will leave or you will be removed. Other delegates protested, but their voices were quiet. Everyone knew that the Kethmorans had the Largi,